without father, without mother, without genealogy. Hebrews 7-3. Imagine opening the pages of the Bible and encountering someone who suddenly appears as if from another dimension. No birth record, no death record. A king, but also a priest. He appears at a crucial moment, blesses Abraham, receives tithes from him, and then disappears, as if the narrative no longer had room for him. For centuries, his name remained shrouded in mystery, until centuries later, the New Testament mentions him again, this time as a key to understanding the very identity and mission of Jesus Christ. This is Melchizedek, perhaps the most enigmatic character in the entire Old Testament. And when you understand who he truly represents, your view of the Bible and salvation history may never be the same. To understand the appearance of Melchizedek, we need to go back in time to Genesis chapter 14. The story begins with an epic conflict known as War of Kings. 4 kings from the east, led by Chedorlaomer, invade Canaan and face a coalition of 5 local kings. In the chaos of the battle, Lot, Abraham's nephew, is captured and taken prisoner, along with all of Sodom's possessions. Upon receiving the news, Abraham, still called Abram, reacts surprisingly. He gathers 318 trained men in his own house and sets out in pursuit. He travels about 200 kilometers to the region of Dan, attacks at night, and achieves an unlikely victory against much larger armies. On the way back, carrying the spoils and rescuing his nephew, he encounters someone, a character who wasn't on either side of the war, who didn't wield a sword, but who brought something even more powerful: bread and wine. In biblical culture, names are not simply identifiers. They carry meaning, destiny, and often a theological message. Melchizedek comes from Hebrew Melchizedek, which means "my king is justice," or simply king of justice. The text of Genesis adds that he is king of Salem. Salem is generally identified with Jerusalem and derives from shalom, Hebrew word for peace. Therefore, this man bears a title that, in itself, is already a sermon: King of Righteousness and King of Peace. 2 concepts that, in the fallen world, rarely go together, but which in biblical theology are inseparable. In the biblical world, genealogies are more than boring lists of names. They are certificates of identity, proof of legitimacy, and often a condition for exercising authority. If you wanted to be a priest in Israel, you had to prove you were a descendant of Levi, specifically the line of Aaron. If you were to be a king, you had to prove your connection to the tribe of Judah and the house of David. But Melchizedek has no recorded genealogy. The author of Hebrews chapter 7 emphasizes this: without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. This does not mean that he was eternal in the literal sense, but that, for the biblical narrative, he is presented outside the human system of succession and lineage. In the inspired record, he appears as one of a separate order, a priest who does not depend on descent to exercise spiritual authority, something unheard of up to that point in salvation history. The surprise doesn't stop there. Melchizedek is introduced as priest of the Most High God, El Elyon in Hebrew. This happens long before Moses was born, before the law was given, before any centralized sacrificial system existed. If there was no tabernacle, if there was no Levitical lineage, how could this man be a priest? The answer points to something that transcends Israel and its history. Melchizedek represents a universal priesthood, not restricted to a single nation, but based on a direct calling from God. He serves as a bridge between the Creator God and the nations, even before Israel became the chosen people. The scene is brief, but full of symbolism. Melchizedek brings bread and wine, basic foods, but which, in the biblical context, carry profound meanings. He blesses Abraham, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, Creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." Abraham responds with an equally symbolic gesture. He gives Melchizedek a tithe of everything he had acquired. At that time, tithing someone was an acknowledgement of their spiritual authority. It's as if Abraham were saying, I acknowledge your superiority in divine authority. This detail becomes crucial when the author of Hebrews argues that Christ as priesthood is superior to the Levitical one. Because if Abraham submitted to Melchizedek, and the Levites are descended from Abraham, then Melchizedek's priesthood is greater than that of the Levites. Psalm 110:4, written centuries later by David, says, You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. This phrase becomes the basis for the author of Hebrews to explain that Jesus Christ is not only king, descended from David, but also high priest, not by the law of Moses, but by an older and more eternal order. Like Melchizedek, Jesus unites the two offices of king and priest. But unlike earthly priests, who offered sacrifices repeatedly, Jesus offered a single perfect sacrifice. And just as Melchizedek did not need a genealogy to exercise his function, Jesus does not depend on Levitical lineage. His priesthood is established directly by God and lasts forever. The identity of Melchizedek has been debated for millennia. There are three main interpretations. A historical human king, ruler of Salem, faithful to the Most High God, used as a prophetic type of Christ. The angel of the Lord, an angelic manifestation that directly represents divine presence and authority. A Christophany, a pre-incarnation appearance of Christ himself, anticipating his role as eternal king and priest. Ancient rabbis, church fathers, and modern scholars have arguments for each hypothesis. But regardless of the theory adopted, what no one denies is that Melchizedek points to Jesus in a unique way. The Melchizedek priesthood is a window into the perfect priesthood of Christ, a priesthood not limited to Israel, not bound by time, not dependent on lineage, but eternal. The bread and wine he offers to Abraham centuries before Jesus, don't they remind you of something? They are clear symbols that point to the Lord's Supper. This shows us that the plan of redemption was not improvised. From the days of Abraham, God was already revealing, in figures and shadows, what would be fully fulfilled in Christ. Melchizedek reminds us that God unites justice and peace in one perfect plan. It points to Christ, our eternal high priest, who intercedes for us before God. When you read about Melchizedek, you are not just reading about a mysterious character. You are seeing a reflection of Jesus himself, revealed long before Bethlehem. If this message has brought new light to you, subscribe now and turn on notifications so we can continue this journey together through the most mysterious figures in the Bible. God bless your life.